What's up, guys, and welcome back to another tier list video. And today we are going to be ranking all 52 movies that have grossed over $1 billion. So I haven't seen any of the Transformers movies, Fast and the Furious, James Bond, or the two Pirates of the Caribbean movies that grossed $1 billion. So let's get into the list. So first up, we have the Titanic. Now, I have a very interesting story with this movie. I've never actually seen it on my own accords, but I watched an edited version at school that makes it PG and for kids, and it wasn't really that good. But they did also take out like an hour and a half of the movie. But I feel like since most people enjoy it, I'm gonna put it in the good category. Next up is the live action Aladdin. Now, this, in my opinion, is the best live action Disney remake. And I feel like it's the only one that's really understood how to do it well. And honestly, I think that it's really good. So I'm going to put it right above Titanic. Next up, we have Spider Man Far From Home. Now, this is just like a generic MCU movie, but I think it would be great. But other than, I don't really think the plot holds up at all. The plot is about Iron Man giving Peter Parker his glasses that are like military grade with no instructions or like no training things. And also, what is Mysterio going to do after everyone believes he's a superhero? It doesn't really make sense, so I'm just going to put it in the good category. Next up is Toy Story 3. Now, this is a perfect conclusion to the trilogy, and it does such a good job at a story. While you know that it's PG and it's for kids, they legit can make you think that they're going to kill off all of your favorite characters. And it does the in the movie is so good, and it's the perfect end to the trilogy, so it's going to go in the great category. Next up is Aquaman. Now, this is just like a fun, super comic book movie. I don't think there's anything really crazy about it, but I do think it's a very fun movie. So I'm going to put it in good. The only reason I'm putting it behind the Titanic is because I haven't really seen the full Titanic, but most people really like it. Next up is I'm sorry, Avengers Age of Ultron. Now, this is basically the first Avengers, just with more fun, more antics, which I guess is kind of the problem here. There's so much plot lines that they can't really focus on one in particular, so not all of them are very cohesive. Next up is the live action Beauty and the Beast. Now, the reason why I think that this one is good, I like this one quite a bit, but I do think that I think it's a perfect adaptation. Other than I don't know why they added in the Black Plague, but I feel like they could have. I'm just gonna choose to watch the original if I'm in the mood to watch this. Like I'm not. If I'm in the mood to watch that, I'm just gonna watch the original. There's no reason for me to go back to this one instead, other than it has a nice new song. Next up is Black Panther. Now, this is one of my favorite MCU movies. I think it's a great story, very fun characters, and a phenomenal villain. Next up is Minions. Now, this movie is bad. So, it takes the fun characters from Despicable Me and spins them off into their own movie. And Minions can't really be a lead. They're more like just a fun comic relief. They can't really make a lead of a movie. Also, the main villain of the Minions movie is pretty bad, so it doesn't even really feel like a movie. I would understand it if it was like a 40-minute like TV special or something, and they like themed it around a holiday, like they did with Madagascar with the penguins. I feel like if they did something like that, then this could have been good. But just having it be a movie, it's just not very good. Next up is Civil War. Now, I really like this movie. It adapts the Avengers fighting, in my opinion, perfectly, and I really like the different sides fighting, and it makes you actually wonder who was right. Leave down below in the comments if you were on Team Iron Man or Team Cap. I'm personally on Team Cap because that is such Cap. That was a really bad joke. Next up is The Dark Knight Rises. Now, this, in my opinion, is a great end to the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy. I just find it to be very boring. I just find some parts to be quite boring, and there's some weird lapses in logic. Next up is Despicable Me 3. Now, this one basically just tries to put all the things that people liked about the franchise all in one movie, where I guess I understand where people are coming from I understand where they're coming from by wanting to do that, but I don't think it makes for a very good movie because it's just like there's so the plot lines and they don't really know which one to focus on. They just should have focused on like the brother stuff because they want to do the new stuff. Next up is The Lion King. Now, I can't exactly put this in the good tier because it's legit the same thing as The Lion King, just without any of the emotions. Animals that are photorealistic lions can't emote. The only reason it's not in the bad one is because it has stunning visuals. Like, it's a great looking movie, but I'm always going to go back to the original. Next up is Avatar. Now, this one I find to be pretty overrated, but I still really enjoy it. But yeah, there's not much I have to really say. It does an overused template, but it's pretty good. Next up is Joker. Now, I haven't seen this one. So I'm gonna put it in haven't seen. I'm going to soon probably though. Next up is Finding Dory. Now this one is legit the same movie as the original. There's nothing new offered. It's just basically a rehash. Next up is Captain Marvel. Now, this is a pretty hot take. Usually on my other videos where I rank this with something, it's usually pretty low, but I'm going to put it right above Finding Dory because this movie actually is an original story, and I just don't like it really, but it's just fun to see this movie, so I'm going to put it in the meh. Next up is Frozen. Now, this movie is probably has the most iconic songs of the 21st century for Disney, and it's actually a pretty good movie. I do like it. Um, a lot of people prefer the second one, but I prefer this one. I feel like the first half is perfect for what they're trying to go for, but I find the second half not to be as good. So I'm gonna put it right here. Next up is Star Wars The Force Awakens. Now, I am a huge defender of this movie and I actually really like it. I think it would be a perfect return to form Star Wars movie if they didn't have plot points that were set up that didn't go anywhere. Next up is Alice in Wonderland. Now, this is basically just a generic blockbuster movie, so it's a good idea to pair up Alice in Wonderland with Tim Burton. On paper, that sounds really good, but they just turned it into a generic blockbuster. Next up is Frozen 2. Now, this movie is basically I just find it very forgettable, but it is nice to see all of the group together, but I just find it to be forgettable, and the songs aren't even close to be as good as some of the ones in the original. Next up is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. This is the perfect finale. I feel like it handles everything wonderfully. I have no real problems with this movie other than it just starts out a bit too quickly in my opinion. But it will appear very high up on my 20 favorite movies list coming later this year. Next up is Avengers Endgame. It's basically a repeat of what I said about Harry Potter, but I don't really care as much about the story. And also, I hated what they did with Hulk in this. Next up is The Incredibles 2. Now, I think this is a very great follow up to the original. And I feel like it does basically everything that a follow up could do perfect. Now, they could have had a better villain, but otherwise, I think it's a really, really good movie. Next up is Iron Man 3. Now, this movie is just the definition of meh to me. I find it almost not, I don't find it rewatchable at all. I find the villain to be pretty bad. The twist reveal is terrible. It's gone down infamous. And the only thing I really do like about this movie is getting to see the interactions with the characters, but that's it. Next up is Jurassic Park. Now, this is one of probably the best cinema movies for this is I'm pretty sure this is the first movie that grossed over $1 billion. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments though. But this movie has effects that still hold up well today, and it's a perfect kickstart to the Jurassic franchise. And it also has a very it's just a very fun and enjoyable movie to watch because in the beginning they're showing hints on why this incredible thing it could be bad, and eventually in the back half it's just fun dino stuff. Next up is Fallen Kingdom. Now, I've always been a bit of a defender of this movie. I actually really like the back half of it with the mansion stuff. I just don't find the cloning stuff to be interesting, or the first half with the island. But I actually like the idea about them bidding on dinosaurs because I think that actually is interesting and it makes sense. Next up is Jurassic World. Now, this is just a movie that I love and I have a lot of fun with. But when you sit back and think about it, it is really dumb. But this is just one of the movies that you just go to and just have a very fun time. This movie never pleases to entertain me, so it goes in the great category for me. Next up is Lord of the Rings Return of the King. Now, this is probably one of my favorite movies. It's another perfect ending. There's nothing really that I would change about it. I just think it's a perfect ending. I love endings to big franchises, and because they are very nice and cool. So that probably sounded very generic thing to say, but I mean it. So I put it there. Next up is Dominion. Now, this is probably my most disappointed movie in of all time. Now, they bring in dinosaurs around the world. And the trailers made it look like the movie was going to be about, oh, they're trying to stop the dinosaurs that's around the world. They bring in the original cast in. So I was extremely hyped for it. And on my first watch of it, I really enjoyed it. But now just looking back on it, it's a ton of wasted potential making the plot about locusts. Like, sure, it does make sense, but it doesn't. Just because something makes sense doesn't mean you need to put it into your story. Next up is Top Gun Maverick. This is a perfect modernized sequel to Top Gun. It is a very enjoyable movie and it has a really good story. I have nothing really bad to say about it, so it goes in great. Next up is Rogue One. Now, when I watch this movie, I really enjoy it, but looking at the poster makes me think about something that I really find annoying about the movie. All the characters, other than Andor, are forgettable. So that's why it can't go that high on my list. Next up is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Now, I think that this movie is really good. This is another one of my favorite movies, and I'm going to put it in here because it was my introduction to the Harry Potter franchise, and it has such like a fun feel to it as like they're like walking around Hogwarts to it. It's very timeless, and I still enjoy it to this day. Next up is Spider-Man Far From Home. I'm sorry, No Way Home. This is another one of my favorite movies. I think it brought in bringing back the characters and it actually worked. And I thought it had a pretty good story, so it goes there. Next up is The Phantom Menace. Now, I don't think that this one is very good. I do agree with most people that this is not a very good Star Wars movie. I'm going to put it right here because I do find the lightsaber scenes to be pretty cool, but other than that, that can't really save a movie for me. Next up is Infinity War. Now this was my favorite Marvel movie. It's gone down a little because I've seen it so many times, but I still enjoy this one thoroughly. Next up is The Last Jedi. I do not like this movie at all. I think it ruined the character of Luke Skywalker. It is easily my least favorite Star Wars movie. Next up is The Avengers, another one of my favorite movies. And this will go probably around here because I feel like it handled the team perfectly. I find the second act to be the best. I just find the first act to be a bit slow. Next up is The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey. Now, I actually really like this movie more than most people give it credit for. I feel like it's a nice start to the Hobbit franchise. I just do think it's a bit too much like Lord of the Rings. Next up is The Lion King. This is easily one of my favorite animated movies of all time. It has a great story, great characters. Everything is like perfect. Has my favorite Disney villain ever. Next up is The Rise of Skywalker. Now, this is more or less one of the more disappointing endings to a franchise that's so beloved, but I actually do like this one. I just feel like the only thing that holds it back from being higher is that they brought back Palpatine and it was the end to the Skywalker saga. But I actually do like the idea about the MacGuffin story in Star Wars. Next up is Toy Story 4. Now, I am very cynical on this movie. I do like Woody's arc in it, but they really just should have ended it with a third movie. Next up is Zootopia. Now, this movie blends in buddy cop formula, action, and a movie about pets in very well. And I actually think that this is a pretty good rewatch. Next up is Avatar: The Way of the Water, and this is going to surprise some people, but this is actually going to end up being one of my favorite movies. I personally loved it. I know a lot of people think it's forgettable and it's a bit a rehash of the first one, but I will disagree. And our last movie on here is The Dark Knight. This is my favorite movie of all time. I'm going to make a whole video talking about this movie. I could go on for days just talking about like one scene from this movie on how good it is. And it is my favorite movie of all time. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. What is your list of the top of the 52 movies that grossed $1 billion? I'll see you in another video. Bye.